everyone, and welcome to part 2 of my 3-part video on Marilyn Monroe. In this section, we're going to talk about her most famous films, her marriages, her marriage with Arthur Miller, her marriage with Joe DiMaggio, and her ultimate downfall. She then went on to make another iconic film, How to Marry a Millionaire. She had 2 amazing co-stars. One of them was Lauren Bacall, and the other one was Betty Grable. Betty Grable, also a Fox icon, was aging out, and Marilyn was supposedly her replacement. So you would think there would be conflict between the 2 actresses, but nothing could be further from the truth. Betty Grable was one of the nicest stars in Hollywood, and she had nothing but compassion for Marilyn Monroe and was as nice to her as she could possibly be. Marilyn continued her difficult behavior, insisting on Natasha being on the set at all times, rarely coming out of her dressing room on time, rarely showing up on set on time. She began having a relationship with alcohol and pills at this time. Here she was in the middle of her golden years. She was everything that she dreamed she wanted to be. She was a big movie star. She was making smash hits. And for some reason, this wasn't making her a happy person. Her marriage was falling apart. I mentioned the issue with the low-cut gold lame dress and Joe DiMaggio storming out and striking her, and that wouldn't be the last time that would happen. And so Hollywood collectively shrugged and looked away when she began really acting out and clearly showing that she had some serious issues. As long as she kept turning out the hits, they looked the other way. During the filming of River of No Return, her and director Otto Preminger butted heads constantly. He got fed up with Natasha's meddling in his direction. He would tell her to do a scene one way, and Natasha would say, no, don't do it like that. Do it like this. And this infuriated Preminger, who was a control freak. Most directors are control freaks. But he actually had the balls to ban Natasha from the set. Marilyn threw a fit. She made the rest of the production a living hell, which was already a very demanding production, forcing her to spend hours drenched from head to toe in river water. So this was not a happy film for her. And at the end of this film, Otto said he wouldn't direct her again for $1 million. And she said she wouldn't work with him ever again. And then she went on strike with the studio because she was tired of all the dumb blonde roles. Although I don't know why River of No Return would have been considered a dumb blonde role. I don't think so. But she wanted better roles, so she went on strike. She wanted more than the $1,500 a week she was getting, first of all, and she wanted better roles. The studio put her on suspension because she refused to do the girl in pink tights twice, okay? But once she married Joe DiMaggio, and that got all the publicity, all the positive publicity that it could possibly get, big movie star marries big baseball player. Hello. They unsuspended her. They were forced to sign a new contract in which she was making significantly more money a week. And they sent her the script for The 7-Year Itch, which was based on a very popular Broadway play. Monroe agreed to do The 7-Year Itch because even though it was another sort of dumb blonde role, it was a prestigious production. It was based on a Broadway play, and she felt that she could do this role justice. Unfortunately, one of the scenes in this movie would prove to be the nail in the coffin to this marriage before it even got started, and this was the dress being blown up to her shoulders by the subway running underneath it scene, famous scene. I think it was shot in New York City on Lexington Avenue. I think I've been there. I was going to go and do a film of that location, but I never got there. But I've been to Lexington Avenue. I don't think the theater's there anymore. At any rate, this took place. The scene took place in front of a large crowd of several thousand people. And even though she was wearing a double underwear, double white underwear. Underneath those blazing white lights, you could see just about everything. And Joe DiMaggio was there watching this, and he got so disgusted that he left the scene, and they had a huge row in the hotel room that night at the St. Regis. They were staying at the St. Regis off Fifth Avenue, and he hit her again. Like, he beat her up pretty much during this row. All of you, poor Joe DiMaggio, they were though in love. He really loved her, yeah. Okay, he had a funny way of showing it. I'm sorry. And this was about it for Marilyn, because she's working. This is her job, okay? If you don't like being married to a movie star, a sex bomb, why did you get married to her in the first place? If you just wanted to be some Italian wife, some housewife. And he knew that wasn't going to happen. So, yeah. That was the end of that. Next thing you see her crying at the courthouse and leaning on her lawyer, and everybody wanted to just give her a big hug. Normally this would have been scandalous, but everyone just wanted to give Marilyn a big hug. She's just a little girl. She needs help. She gets getting mixed up with the wrong people, and she needs saving, and let's step in and save her, poor thing. After her devastating divorce, Marilyn decided that she needed to change her pace. She needed to change up her life. So she gave Fox the middle finger, moved to New York, and decided that she was going to enroll in the actor's studio and learn her craft. And this is something that I so admire from her. I mean, kudos to her. She would put her hair up in a scarf, wear dark glasses and no makeup, bulky sweaters, walk around, ride the subway. Nobody knew who she was. And she initially rented an apartment, and then she moved to the Connecticut home of her photographer and friend, Milton Green, and his wife. And she loved being a nobody and getting off the hamster wheel. Meantime, the 7-Year Itch became a smash hit, and she was brilliant. Her comedic timing was superb. She was absolutely brilliant in this film. Everyone loved her. So, yeah, to just leave Hollywood after you've had 3 smash hits in a row took a lot of guts on her part, but she did it. And she began seeing an intellectual and one of America's greatest treasures, the playwright Arthur Miller, who was just off his success, one of the biggest successes on Broadway for a playwright, Death of a Salesman. He was considered mega talented. He was an intellectual. He was a writer. He was totally East Coast. So she began dating him, and he was much older than her. But they seemed to click. She seemed happy with him. She seemed to be the obedient student at his knee, learning about literature and plays and the stage. And she seemed genuinely happy. So it's a wonder that Fox was able to coax her back with another contract, more money, and certain accommodations, such as she could make 1 independent film a year, and continue her study, and she could bounce back and forth between the West Coast and the East Coast as she chose. So the first movie that Marilyn made when she returned to Fox was something of her choosing, and it was called Bus Stop. It was also based on a Broadway play, a very successful Broadway play, and she played the vulnerable and the sad Cherry, and she did a very good job in this movie, and many people thought that it was admirable, but the movie didn't do that great, and Marilyn kind of was acting a little bit bossy and a little bit demanding. Once again, she was chronically late. Her alcohol and drug taking had increased, so her relationship with Arthur Miller wasn't helping that any. And the movie was not that big of a success. People didn't really flock to the theaters to see it. So a lot of people felt that success had gone to Marilyn's head a little bit. Her and Arthur Miller married, but on the day that they were to announce their engagement, a foreshadowing, tragic event happened. They were being pursued by photographers from Paris Match. And these photographers didn't know the country roads of Connecticut like Arthur Miller did. He was very adept at navigating these roads, and he accelerated very fast. And when the reporters tried to follow him, they lost control on a hairpin curve and hit a tree. And one of the reporters was thrown from the car, had her face sliced open, and she was killed. And the Millers had pulled over to help, and the scene was horrendous and traumatic, and it really did a number on Marilyn. So when you see that video of them announcing their engagement, you can see she's clearly upset. She barely speaks a word. She clings to him like a little bird with her head down, and this because she just an hour earlier had witnessed a woman practically die right in front of her, and it was due to the fact that her husband had sped up so quickly that they had lost control of their car in pursuit. That was almost like a foreshadowing of what was going to happen later with Marilyn Monroe and this awful marriage, which never should have happened, and eventually the downfall of her career and her life. She formed her own production company, and this production company, Marilyn Monroe Productions, produced exactly one film, and that film was The Prince and the Showgirl. This was a film that she was starring with Laurence Olivier, husband to Vivien Leigh. There's a few famous photographs of the two couples posing together, and Vivien Leigh looks so demure and sweet in her designer suit, and Marilyn's over there in this skin-tight white number that looks like it could bust open at any moment. She was horrible on the set of this film. She was constantly late. She barely knew her lines. She traded in Natasha for Susan Strasberg, Lee Strasberg's daughter, and now it was Susan that was required on the set at all times, frustrating people even more. She didn't seem like she had prepared, and she's working with one of the most professional actors of the time. Laurence Olivier was a classically trained actor of the theater in England, and he was very professional. Marilyn Monroe was not professional. At this point, she often showed up drunk or high on pills, unprepared, and just expected things to fall into place for her. So she began to get a definite nasty reputation by this point. Her marriage began to fall apart, and her husband, being a writer, he didn't like being Mr. Monroe any more than the other two did, but the thing about him was he wrote this shit down. Okay, and one day she read something, a letter or something that he had written to his daughter, in which he claimed that she was too much of a burden for him to handle, that she needed constant reassurance, constant attention, constant tending to. She had chronic insomnia. She was clearly addicted to sleeping pills and addicted to uppers. She couldn't function without them. She was also drinking too much. And so she was a handful and a half. And he was regretting marrying her. And he said this in this letter. And after all is said and done, she ended up having a miscarriage after this movie wrapped, because that's what happens when you pump your body with pills and booze while you're pregnant and constantly under stress. So their marriage began to crumble. After it had barely got started, their marriage began to crumble. The Prince and the Showgirl did really well at the box office, and Marilyn Monroe shines in that film. If you watch the film, you'd never think anything was wrong. She looked wonderful. She did great. But behind the scenes, she was falling apart, and her marriage was falling apart. It was a year before she would even attempt to make another film, and in that year, her husband began getting dragged before the House Un-American Activities Committee for being a communist, because, you know, all of those playwrights and on Broadway were commies. We know that. And he was facing serious jail time for this. And Marilyn suffered another miscarriage during this time. And then she took an overdose of sleeping pills. This is her second suicide attempt, by the way. But Miller found her in time and was able to get her to the hospital and saved her life at that time. So now we've got 2 suicide attempts behind us. And Poor Marilyn. The good times were over for her at this point. But Marilyn had one more precious, dumb, blonde role in her, and that was for the film Some Like It Hot. This is probably one of her most classic films, and it also proved to be one of her most troubled films. Her own husband encouraged her to do this film. He felt she could do it justice and that she would shine, and he wasn't wrong. She was brilliant in this film. No one could have done a better job than her in this film. But the shoot was a disaster from day one. Billy Wilder had worked with Marilyn in The 7-Year Itch, and apparently she was not as bad during that filming. So he thought nothing of working with her again on Some Like It Hot. Big mistake. Nearly caused this guy to have a heart attack. I'm going to read to you from my book what went on the very first day of shooting. This is from my book, Tragic Hollywood, Beautiful, Glamorous, and Dead, the first one. Miller encouraged her to take the role of Sugar Cane in the Billy Wilder directed film Some Like It Hot, another dumb blonde role that she would play to perfection. Wilder and Monroe worked together 4 years earlier on The 7-Year Itch. Apparently that movie went relatively well, as Wilder had no qualms working with her again. He soon regretted the decision. On the very first day of wardrobe fittings, Marilyn showed up 4.5 hours late, spent another 2 hours in makeup, then skipped onto the set at 6:10 p.m., where she was met with a deserted building. Wilder and the entire cast and crew had gone home at 6 p.m. after waiting for Princess to show her face for 6 hours. That's not professional. That's pretty much how the entire shoot of the movie went. So, even though we got an amazing film out of this, it took a big toll on everyone who was working with her. Tony Curtis, who was one of her co-stars, had history with Marilyn Monroe. They had dated a very, very long time ago, and both of them were still unknown. She was living with Shelley Winters in an apartment at the time, and Tony Curtis was a cousin of Shelley Winters. So when he came out to Hollywood to visit Shelley Winters and break in to Hollywood himself, of course he became infatuated with his cousin's roommate, who happened to be Marilyn Monroe. And they went out several times, and yes, they did hook up. And why not? They were both beautiful, young, had the same ambitions. So they had a history. Apparently, they supposedly hooked up again during the filming of Some Like It Hot. I'm not sure if this is the case or not. It wouldn't surprise me. Marilyn wasn't discriminating. She didn't particularly take her marriage vows that seriously. And she was in a bad place. And she tended to make bad decisions when she was in a bad place. So when he said kissing her was like kissing Hitler, I don't know. I think he just said that to sell books because he kissed her a lot and not just on the set. So if it was so bad, I don't think he would have been kissing her at all. Concludes part 2. In part 3 of Marilyn Monroe video, we're going to look at her final film, The Misfits, her only nude scene that she ever did that was never shown on film, and why in the world she ever got involved with the Kennedy brothers. Stay tuned.